One of the common misconceptions about PTSD is that it is a soldier's disease, but a lot of us have begun hearing about PTSD more in the news, in the media, because of the soldiers coming home from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of times our association is, oh, it takes something grand like a war for someone to get this. And we only hear about it often being talked about in reference to our soldiers coming back. Statistics show that 70% of Americans will experience at least one traumatic event in their life. And so it is much more common than we give credence to, and it's not something that is just relegated to our men and women coming back from the front lines. Which is another interesting point. PTSD doesn't fit the stereotype of just being a man's issue. It affects men and women and children. Some studies show that PTSD is almost twice the rate in women than it is in men. And there's varying reasons for this, and it's not always researched yet completely as to why. But PTSD doesn't have to be something like a war. PTSD can come from experiencing a crime or being the victim of a crime, or it can be part of a natural disaster. You know, here in the Gulf region, we just came through Hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Ike, and pretty rapidly, one right after the other. Each in and of themselves may not be a traumatic event. Clumped together, they can be a traumatic event. And of course, each can be depending on your own individual experience. Other individualized traumas could be something like abuse, whether that be verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. That can run the gamut. And it can be something that can be chronic over the course of a lifetime, or it can be an individualized incident, a single episode of abuse. Can lead towards the development of PTSD. Of the 70% of Americans who can have a traumatic event, about 20% of that 70 will develop PTSD or PTSD-like symptoms. So at any one time, as many as 8% of Americans could be dealing with PTSD, which is a large part of our society and not something that we often think about. So how do you know if you have PTSD versus just regular anxiety? Sometimes regular anxiety is our mind just wandering and worrying and spinning and fixating. With PTSD, there is a difference. Your mind can feel stuck, but you're stuck on a particular event, something that physically happened, and we call it a re-experiencing. There can be moments where you feel like you're in that moment again. You know, stuck in a traffic jam on I-45, and all of a sudden your brain and body start responding as if you're stuck in that traffic jam that happened during Hurricane Rita, and you were worried about your life and that of your family. That kind of re-experiencing, this moment of belief of it's happening to me again, when in reality it's not. PTSD can show up as avoidance. Sometimes people will begin to avoid specific things that are reminders of the event. They will avoid bridges, they will avoid homes or different rooms of the house or different pieces of clothing or different relationships. There's almost an intentionality to have nothing to do with anymore something that reminds you or was part of the trauma. Like sometimes you can experience PTSD from a horrible car wreck. And so you begin to avoid driving. Sometimes it's instant, you just cut it out altogether, but sometimes you start backing off slowly. The point is, you cut something out of your life that used to be there. So there is this avoidance of the stimulus. And then there is the hypervigilance. And what that can look like is you're just very aware, hyperarousal, hypersensitive, noises, bangs, clicks. You notice these things, there's flinching, jumping. You're very aware of your surroundings. A lot of times I see in people, they always want to be the one with their back in the corner so that they can survey the whole room. They want to know where all the exits are so that they can get out. Always planning, always thinking, always looking for the opportunities for what could go wrong, what might go wrong, and all of these things dovetailing, fitting together. You can have it show up in recurring dreams and nightmares and night terrors. PTSD is a pretty big umbrella. and lots of things can fall under it, but there is help and there is hope for PTSD, and it can be treated and the symptoms can be reduced. Sometimes that requires medicine. A lot of times it's just the processing of the event and talking through it to bring some of the sting out of it, to help normalize it. Because what happens in PTSD is the brain seems to get stuck on something. And so by talking through it, and sometimes with the help of meds, we can relax that part of the brain so that you never forget the incidences, but they no longer control your life and control your actions and affect the way you want to live your life. PTSD is something that fortunately is losing its stigma. We're becoming much more aware of it as a society, and that's something here at the Nick Finnegan Counseling Center we're more than willing and able to help people walk through these traumatic events.